Someone asked me recently, what's your productivity hack? What's the tool you're using? An old school notebook and my iPhone notes section. And it's because it works for me. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I love to write, so I have a notebook with me generally at all times. And if I have an idea for an article or a post, I'll just jot it down. And so that's the thing about ideas. We have them all the time.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have, but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to The Anonymous Marketer. I'm your host, Kirsty Lang. And today we are talking about how the heck you build a personal brand while working full-time. Joining me today is Mita Mallick, who is an incredible authority on the topic because she managed to do exactly this while working in some incredibly important leadership roles at various major companies, and now has an incredible 160,000 followers plus on LinkedIn to show for it. So it is no surprise that along with her impressive roster of work and projects, which we'll get into in a second, that Mita has recently released her own LinkedIn course, which is called Balancing a Full-Time Job as a Creator, which is why I'm so grateful to have her in the studio today. Mita, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. I've been prepping this intro. There is so much to include. You kindly sent me a wonderful bio. I've added some bits. It's just, let's get into it because I think it is very important to understand the context of Mita's background. So she has an extensive career as a multicultural marketer, being a fierce advocate for including and representing Black and Brown communities. Her book, Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace, is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. Enrolled like Chief Diversity Officer, she has brought her talents and expertise to companies such as Carter, Unilever, Pfizer, Avon, Johnson & Johnson, and more. She is also the co-host of her own podcast, The Brown Table Talk, so I'm sure she's absolutely going to show me up today. She is a frequent contributor for Harvard Business Review, Adweek, Entrepreneur, and Fast Company, where she weighs in on cultural, corporate, and marketing topics. Mita has also been featured in the New York Times, The Washington Post, Time Magazine, Forbes, Essence, Cosmopolitan, and Business Insider. So it is incredible to me that she has found time to build and nurture such an engaged following on LinkedIn. She is a LinkedIn top voice. Blue badge, not gold. We're not going to get into that over here. With, as I said, 160,000 followers. She creates phenomenal thought leadership content, and it's absolutely paradigm shifting. And I highly, highly recommend giving her a follow.
Oh, thank you.
Am I gushing? I feel like I'm gushing.
Thank you so much. That was very kind introduction. I appreciate it.
You are fantastic. So I was blown away. I was like, I'm going to just reach out to Mita and be like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? And she replied, she was like, yeah, absolutely. When is good for you? And yeah, I was blown away by that as well. So without further ado, on to today's listener question. If you are new to the show, for context, all the episodes of Anonymous Marketer are dictated by our listeners who send in their burning questions via marketersindemand.com/anonymous, where you can do the same if you would like an expert like Mita to answer yours. So here is the question for today's show. I have been trying to create content on LinkedIn in the hope of building a personal brand, but I'm struggling to stay consistent. I work long hours and have a busy family life, and it's so difficult to make the time. How do people do it? So, Mita, there is so much to unpack here. I thought it would be great to start about your journey to becoming a creator. What was your first day?
I love the question. I love the follow-up on first step. My first step was I was just watching.
Okay.
So I started on LinkedIn like 5 years ago. I used to run employer brand at my former company along with inclusion. And I learned a lot about LinkedIn as somebody running employer brand. And I was the person who would just scroll and read what people were posting, but didn't know if I should comment or like it, and then would just keep scrolling. And so I really enjoyed the platform, but I was anxious about how I could show up. And it was really during the pandemic when we all experienced so much grief and loss and isolation and loneliness that I started posting on LinkedIn, and I started posting pretty regularly. And I found the more authentic I was, the more engagement and response I would get. And that can be scary. But I think, we'll talk about this, particularly in the age of AI. everyone is scared their job's going to go away. Everything's getting automated. And you can tell now on LinkedIn and your social media feeds, you can tell what's being generated by AI. And honestly, I just scroll by. I can tell in my comment section, right?
That's such a trend at the moment, isn't it? Sorry, I'm seeing so much of that.
It is.
AI comments.
And it's totally
bizarre.
diluted. And it makes me sad because we're losing the authenticity because people connect to really deeply personal stories. And so my journey was I just started posting. And then I just got really consistent about it, which thank you for the shout out. I cover in the LinkedIn course in more detail. But the consistency is key. I post my own content. I write my own content.
Yeah.
I, at this point, do not have a virtual assistant or any assistant. I don't have a team. I do it because I care and I enjoy it and I write. And I have a method that works for me. But I think too many people are looking to have the finger snapped for whatever it is you're chasing because we've been raised like that. We get what we want when we want it. And a lot of the things you see, you don't see the hard work that goes behind it. I didn't get to 160,000 followers and more overnight.
Certainly it is. Absolutely. And I can imagine when you started out at the time, I wasn't active on LinkedIn at the time. I just kind of had like a very basic, LinkedIn is where my CV goes. And I think this kind of move towards like LinkedIn creators and B2B creators is fantastic. But to me, that shift it's happened quite gradually. And now it's kind of like slowly, and then all at once. How did you find kind of growing at that time? Was it a green space for your content or was it still quite tricky to kind of get it in front of the right people?
I think it was over time, just testing content, just like you do as a brand, like testing and trying different things. But again, if I look at my content journey over the last 4 years, my community has grown and people have connected with my content from the feedback I hear is the personal stories. I talk about how we can make inclusive workplaces for all. I share a lot of stories in that space. I know what my brand is about, just like many brands I've run and many brands that many of your listeners are running. It's like I know what the attributes are of my brand that I'm trying to convey to my community. And so I think the more and more you can become very clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you want to share, you will see the engagement in your community grow. Now, I do think what you brought up is really interesting. I think organic reach has very much changed over the last few years on LinkedIn.
Yeah, even the last few
weeks. There was probably more opportunity to be posting, I don't know, things that were probably AI generated, things that were much more generic, like, I love this leadership post. Yay, thumbs up. And then you'd get like 1,000 likes. And now, as you see the algorithm changing, LinkedIn is prioritizing content that's providing tips. That's providing help, advice, guidance. Callie Schweitzer, who's a friend, says LinkedIn is a platform of generosity. They want to create a platform where people are giving and taking, and it's reciprocal. So if I am posting only selfies of myself all day, every day, right, without much tips and values and tools, and listen, and I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that if I was an influencer, a fashion influencer, maybe LinkedIn might not be the place. Maybe it will be if I actually have tips about fashion rather than, hey, just look at my beautiful blouse. No, here's the decision I made to curate this outfit, right? And so that's what I think LinkedIn is really encouraging the tips and advice rather than just the end result.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love your point about it's a platform of generosity. And I think a lot of people are losing sight of that at the moment. It feels to me that it's a platform where people want to get more than they give. Anyway, that's beside the point. What I did want to ask you is kind of before we get into the specifics of how you managed to do all of this, I'd love it if you talk a little bit about how LinkedIn, being active on LinkedIn and growing an engaged audience there has benefited you professionally.
Well, I wouldn't have gotten my book deal without LinkedIn. So I have a book called Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace. It made the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller lists and a number of other lists. And this was a book I wrote 4 years ago before publishing it in 2023. And I couldn't get a book deal. I had rejection after rejection after rejection. And it was through my LinkedIn Features podcast with my friend DC Marshall of Brown Table Talk. She had a book deal with Wiley. And we talk about this on the podcast on the importance of strategic introductions. Her editor, Victoria at Wiley, listened to the podcast and said to Dee, your co-host sounds amazing. Does she have a book deal? And it was through LinkedIn, right? Because then the podcast was sponsored by LinkedIn. It's part of LinkedIn's podcast network. She then started checking out my content, and that helped with the book deal. But then my community showed up, oh my God, in such a huge way for my book launch. I have so many people still DMing me. I love your book. I'm doing a book club. I recommended it to our chief people officer. My CEO is reading it. And this is all through LinkedIn. I am on Instagram. I'm on X a little, but LinkedIn is my primary platform. So it has been incredible. My book launch would not have been this successful without my LinkedIn community. And it's really interesting. My editor at Wiley said, we're meeting like week after week in staff meetings, and people are asking like, how is she selling so many books? Well, it's my community that's buying it, because people, there's also this misunderstanding, because there can be cases, let's say someone's on X and they have millions and millions of followers. That doesn't always translate into book sales. Followers don't always mean that you're going to get people to buy books. It is the engagement piece as well. It's the engagement.
The age-old marketing problem. How do we convert all these eyeballs into sales?
How do we convert them all? Yes.
Yes. I love that. It's so interesting to know that you'd written the book prior to getting active, and you had this amazing book that just needed to get in front of the right person. Yeah, the power of your LinkedIn network is incredible. I love that. So back to the kind of the how-to. I think this is a problem that a lot of people face. How do you get over the initial cringe of posting on LinkedIn? Because I think that is a barrier to a lot of people. They feel like, oh, my friend from high school is going to see this, or, how did you get over that? Did that even factor into your decision to stop posting?
There's a famous quote that says, if you wouldn't ask for their opinion, don't accept their criticism. So why are we so worried about what other people think? Unless it's people very close to us. Yeah. That's something else that we contend with, when people close to us aren't rooting for us. But I do think it's just the consistency and getting over it. There's no such thing as a bad post. There isn't. I have posts that, don't get as many likes or engagement. Okay, maybe it was just not the right time, not the right day. I find it really interesting from a marketer's perspective. I might just tweak something and post it again. Was it the graphic? Was it the hook? Yeah. Was it just a lot of other things going on in the world? You just don't know. So you can't just be hung up, my post didn't get enough likes. I posted a ton in the beginning. I don't think I got many likes. I mean, it just kept going. It's the consistency. It is the you do it for 5 days and then you stop and you wonder why. I mean, you have to be consistent about it. And the consistency, I think, is just a leadership trait that people really undervalue or don't talk about enough.
Absolutely. And I love what you say about kind of just going and learning as you go, right? Because that, I think a lot of people kind of go in feeling like they need this cut and dried strategy, especially marketers, right? Because we're used to having big picture marketing strategies that we're working from.
Yes.
And if it's not, you don't have a perfect plan going in, I think that holds a lot of people back as well. So I love your point about just learning as you go. Just
absolutely
learning on the job. Mita, I wanted to ask about, so you don't have a virtual assistant, a normal assistant, any kind of help. What is your productivity system? How do you make sure that you get content out while still working full time, having these incredible... It's a book.
I'm holding up a notebook. This is someone asked me recently, I think we talked about it too. What's your productivity hack? What's the tool you're using? An old school notebook and my iPhone notes section. And it's because it works for me. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I love to write. So I have a notebook with me generally at all times. And if I have an idea for an article or a post, I'll just jot it down. And so that's the thing about ideas. We have them all the time. You might read an article or you might see something happen at work and you think, oh, I want to post about that. But jot it down so you remember it. And that's what I do. And usually on the weekends or in the evenings when the calm starts, the chaos has ended with bedtime in my home, I might have some time to myself in between work and other things where I might just write up post ideas. And so I'll jot down ideas in the journal and then I might flesh them out on my iPhone. And I use Canva for a lot of my quote graphics. And that's pretty much it. I mean, for me, I'm really focused on the quality of the writing and the content. I'm not someone who does a ton of video. I should probably do more, but just not a ton of video. But I like the written form and I like graphics that are eye-catching and quotes that stop people and make people think. And so that's really my process. And it is finding the time to do it, meaning it's like the evening hours, if it's 10, 15 minutes, and then on the weekends. Now, writing is half art, half discipline. So the more you do it, you get better at it. Probably early on, I spent more time on it. But also now I find it's really interesting. The posts that are from the heart and I post pretty quickly are sometimes the one that gets the most engagement because I didn't overthink it. I didn't like, oh, should I put another sentence here? Or I should explain this more? And it's like, no, I'm just going to write it and post it. And you get better at it. That's the only thing. Like when you're more consistent in anything, you just get better at the skill.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of, you find your voice and then kind of tapping into that rhythm is so much easier the more you do. I also love the point that, and you touch on this in your course as well, about figure out what content formats work for you, because I think that can be a blocker for a lot of people as well. They think, oh gosh, now there's a LinkedIn video feed, I have to do video. Yes. And we know, so a lot of the research that we've done on various social media platforms and Buffer is video consistently perform the best. But if you are only going to be able to produce one video a month or, one every 2 months,
right,
it's not, it's not going to generate that kind of impact. So it's what you can do consistently. Yeah, what you can do consistently is what is going to have the most impact, even if it's not video at all. I love that you do have some great videos from your podcast as well. I was scrolling.
I do, but I experiment and I know what my default go-to format that is consistent, exactly what you're saying. Yeah. The writing with the graphic is my consistent post. It doesn't mean I won't do video, but to your point, I love that. If I was to say that the only way I could be successful on LinkedIn is to do video 7 days a week, game over. Wouldn't happen for me. It's exhausting. And for some people, like you're watching TikTok, for some people, video is their go-to. I have so many friends who will say, I could never write like you do, but they're amazing orators. They can just pick up their iPhone, just talk at the camera like they're talking to a friend and make an amazing 1 to 2 minute video. Everyone has different talents. You just have to lean into what your talent is and what is going to help you, as you say, stay consistent.
Yeah, I love that. This is something that I bang on about all the time, is that consistency is the magic bullet when it comes to learning a new skill, when it comes to exercise, and growing a following or building your personal brand. I think that is the key piece that a lot of folks miss or get in their own way of because they want everything to be perfect right out the gate. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is your advice for building an engaged audience specifically on LinkedIn. You've mentioned a little bit about personal stories, things like CTAs, engaging with comments. What is your kind of, I want to say secret sauce, but I know it's not that easy. What are your go-to tactics?
I think my journey has changed. I think I went from being scared to posting and just reading other people's things to sometimes doing a like or a love, to sometimes commenting but not sure what to say. And then I went to posting very frequently. And now I am now trying to comment more. First of all, I try to respond within the first hour of posting to comments that I get. I don't follow any sort of LinkedIn schedule. I follow my own schedule, which is I'm usually posting between around 7 a.m. before the chaos erupts in my home. And so between 7 to 7:30, I'm responding to comments as I'm having my morning tea. And then I usually might check at lunch and then log on again at night. And so that's the best I can do. So that is it. You can't put so much pressure on yourself. I'm not a full-time creator. And so, I have many other jobs and hats I wear. So I try to engage on that platform as much. But one of the things I've been thinking about, and I was talking to a friend about this who also has a big following, is like with privilege and power comes responsibility. And so I think now I try to go and comment on creators who have a smaller following, right? Particularly creators who are commenting on my post all the time. I can't always do it. Like I try to do it. I won't consistently comment on the same person's post. I try to spread the love because there's only so many hours in the day. But I've been thinking a lot about that because I wish when I was starting out that some of these really big creators would have come and commented on my post. That would have meant a lot. And so I'm trying to put that back into the universe. But the comments is where it's at. Like and that's actually where I've gotten speaking engagements for my book. People have reached out and said, we want to buy copies of your book because we've been watching what you're posting, or would you come do a talk? It's really interesting. It's like building these, as a friend said to me, my friend Jill Katz said to me when I first started on LinkedIn, she's like, it's the water cooler moments that you would have in the office. That's how you think of comments, right? You go to see what people are discussing, or you saw a post and you have a reaction, put it in the comments, right? And so that's how you generate conversation
I love
and
that.
engagement.
I love how your whole strategy is about taking the pressure off. And I think so many of these kind of LinkedIn gurus that you find these days will be like, you need to be posting X times a day and you need to be replying to every single comment and have a list of other creators that I love that it's just my biggest takeaway from this conversation. It's almost kind of lifted a weight that was on my shoulders that I didn't quite know
Love
that
that.
I had. Is just, take the pressure off, do what feels good, do what you have time for. And if you keep at it, the results will come.
Absolutely. Someone once told me, well, if someone comments and you don't respond, that's like a conversation someone started and you never responded, they're going to be really hurt. And I was like, that's like really overwhelming because I get a lot of comments on my post and
Very
I'm really
stressful.
grateful for them. But I'm really only able to respond in the morning or at night. And so I hope that people know, like if they know me, it's not because I don't want to respond. It's just there's only so many hours of the day and I'm not on LinkedIn, all day, every day. And so I think the people who are in my community now know. I have some people who will respond to my comment right away in the morning because they'll know that I'll respond back because it's within, they know they've been tracking my schedule. The other thing I would say is like, I also know, one of the strategies you'll see is like if you go and post on other people's posts who have big followings, that also helps grow your following as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really good to know as well. Mita, last question. I know we're up against time. If you could just like have a conversation with this person that was tearing their hair out about the idea of finding time to build a personal brand on LinkedIn, what would you say to them?
Start today. Just start today. Start posting. It's just like any habit you're trying to create. Whether that's drink more water, go to bed earlier, drink less wine. I mean, think of all the things we're trying to, like, you just have to start and commit and do it every day. And if you're listening and if I have time and if you tag me and you tag me in your post and you ask me an interesting question, I will go and respond. The other thing is, as my friend Jamal Marshall says, let's not do thirsty tagging. Don't post something and then post, he says thirsty tag, which is posting the 100 people you know. And you're like, what is this? Like, why am I being posted on this? I get confused. But if you posted something and you said, hey, I read this in your book, and actually I went through a similar experience. Mita, what do you think? Like, and if I don't know you, I likely would respond if I saw the notification. So that's one other way to get people's attention. But start today. Start today.
I love that. That is a perfect note to end on. We have really just skimmed the surface here. So if you are serious about creation, Mita's course is available on LinkedIn Learning. She tackles so many things we've been unable to cover here, and it's brilliant for complete beginners as well. She touches on the fundamentals of what kind of content to create in the first place, how to navigate building a brand that benefits you and your employer, which is a really important piece of the puzzle as well, and how to handle engaging with negative comments, which is something I'm terrible at. I just finished the course and I highly, highly recommend it. I will link it in the show notes. Mita, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. This show is part of Marketers in Demand, a network of podcasts featuring the world's leading B2B marketers. Unlock your full potential as a B2B marketer by going to marketersindemand.com.